Hey everybody, so today's a crazy day. I had originally planned on discussing cannabis social responsibility, which is corporate social responsibility in the cannabis space with you today. And I'll still talk with you about that probably tomorrow morning, but something happened this morning that really kind of threw a wrench in the gears, which is the announcement from Jeff Sessions that he is going to rescind the Cole-Ogden memo. And in the cannabis space, we all really know what that means, but if you're not really familiar with the Cole-Ogden memo, in a very shorthand, it essentially says that the federal government is not going to allocate any money or resources to prosecute cannabis in states where it is medicinally or recreationally legal. It was passed during Obama's administration under Eric Holder, and has been sort of the way the federal government has dealt with states being legal. So the reason why California and Colorado and Oregon, Washington, and everyone else who has either recreationally or medicinally legalized cannabis and been able to continue operating under a legal market is because of the Cole-Ogden memos, which this morning Jeff Sessions said he was going to rescind. And I remember the last time that that Sessions even hinted towards looking into these memos. This was at the beginning of the year in 2017, and it really kind of froze the market up. This was just him talking about digging into it. So he said, I am going to be evaluating and reviewing the way that we handle cannabis and the way that we prosecute. Just the mentioning of reviewing it caused the market to freeze up for something like 3 months. It didn't mean all investments stopped in cannabis, but for the most part, a lot of people were waiting to see what would happen. After about March or April, things started to free up again. People started to consider, well, it doesn't look like Trump will allow Sessions to do these things because he said X, Y, and Z, but Trump is all over the goddamn place, and he continues to make inconsistent statements on it. So mostly the fact that the review happened from Sessions, and then letters from all of the corresponding state governors at the same time came out, essentially saying that they were going to stand up for what their state's constitutions have done. They're going to fight him at all costs. More or less gave the impression to the industry that Sessions was not actually going to end up taking the step, because taking the step is drawing an actual line in the sand, like a firm line in the sand that now creates the battle between the states and the industries that are, or the cannabis industry itself at large, against the federal government. That line had not yet been drawn, although we were expecting it or kind of anticipating it, or were worried about it. But it's now drawn in the sand. And so what this means is, if the Ogden and Cole memo are rescinded, the federal government can now begin prosecuting, regardless of a state's constitutional rights, cannabis companies in those states. And what that looks like can be a lot of things in a lot of ways. So the first thing people are going to think of is they're going to start arresting folks. And I don't think that's going to happen. That requires resources and collaboration with state governments that state governors are not going to be willing to allow. When it comes to how the states react to this kind of news, and they did this last year, but they're really doing it forcefully this year, which is a good sign. You get state representatives and state governors. You're getting a lot of this in California and Colorado and Oregon right now, coming out and making very firm statements about how they are not going to collaborate with the federal government on these regards, and they're going to fight them at all costs to protect the will of the voters in their states. And that's okay, that's good. But ultimately, that means that they will not allow arrests or raids on these businesses, and that's not the thing we need to really worry about right now. What I would like to be seeing more from the politicians responding to Sessions is some like actual specific bills and tactics that they're going to follow to prevent the Attorney General from making any impact whatsoever on the cannabis space. And on a national level, you're getting a lot of sort of broad, this is against the will of the voters, this is against the will of the people, the majority of voters do not agree with this, but no actual like specific action, with the exception of my man Cory Gardner, who specifically is saying now's the time to pass the Marijuana Justice Act. So unless Congress steps in and does some actual physical legislating or changes the regulations that Congress or that the AG has to follow in terms of how they prosecute cannabis, the Attorney General actually can wreak quite a bit of havoc without having to deploy anybody out of Washington. Lately, he made a few appointments to U.S. federal prosecutors within, I think, something like 11 different states. These are interim appointments until like an actual appointment is permanently made, which means those interim appointments are extremely heavily conservative. They didn't have to be vetted. They're just going to be doing the job in the meantime. So that means that here in Colorado and also in California, we have an interim federal prosecutor who is most likely very much in mind with Trump and Sessions on these issues, is very conservative and is going to follow the will of Jeff Sessions during this phase. So what can happen now that can really cause quite a ripple and quite an impact on our industry is that Sessions could do something as simple as asset forfeiture of just the top company. Let's say, you know, Sessions looks in Colorado and says, okay, LiveWell and John Lord, they have, you know, the most amount of revenue or the most amount of stores in the cannabis market in Colorado, so freeze their bank account. He does that, and LiveWell is stopped dead in their tracks. And not only is LiveWell stopped dead in their tracks and then going to have to fight a protracted battle in the courts for probably something like 18 months, but that's a message that's then going to ripple out to every cannabis owner in Colorado. If LiveWell just got stopped, and all I had to do was just seize their bank account, freeze their assets, and their company is completely halted in its tracks. And if they can do that for LiveWell, they can do that for anybody. They don't have to actually arrest anybody. They can also file RICOs against banks that operate with cannabis companies, which can cause a hell of a devastation. I mean, there's not a whole lot of banks that already want to operate in the industry anyway, so those few banks who do have a large breadth of clients. And if any one of them get frozen or have their charters revoked or get RICO'd, they can impact a number of large businesses. So the fear here isn't that, you know, I'm in Colorado and I'm smoking a joint and I'm going to get arrested. The fear isn't that I run a cannabis dispensary and I'm going to get arrested. The fear is that I run any cannabis business and the bank that I operate with gets frozen, gets their charter revoked, or gets RICO'd, or I am a big enough company that they just freeze my assets. That can be devastating. And it's a really, really big fear. I think right now, the thing that's different about this year from last year is that last year there was supposition, but there was also fear of the monster in Washington that was becoming the Trump administration. We did not know what to expect from them. It was the first month of the administration. They could have done anything, and they didn't really around this issue very much. So you know, I guess the fear of not knowing was greater than what the actual administration is now capable of. And a year now into the administration, we see that they're a relatively feckless, chaotic, and completely disorganized administration that's not really capable of actually accomplishing anything meaningful. And that's a good thing for us because now Congress isn't as afraid of them as they were before. The senators and congressmen who can actually do something right now are less afraid of the backlash of the voters that supported Trump than they were last year. Last year, the voters were the most powerful thing on the planet. They were the ones who put this administration in power, and every congressman, as you saw very quickly, was, you know, basically licking the boots of Trump right off the beginning because they were afraid that they were going to not get reelected in the midterms. Going into the midterms, we see that the approval ratings for Trump now are so in the dumps, he couldn't even get Roy Moore elected. So the voters aren't where the Trump voters aren't as strong an edifice as they used to be, and they certainly don't have any power any longer, you know, relatively speaking, at least not where they were. And also we've seen the administration be just exposed left and right for quite literally how stupid, feckless, and disorganized they are. Just recently, Stephen Wolf, Michael Wolf, I think it's Michael Wolf, a reporter, he's releasing a book about the Trump administration. He was referred to as being a semi-permanent seat in the West Wing. So this guy had unbelievable access to the Trump administration. And if you haven't read the excerpts from his book, you must read them. I'll put an article in the comments section so you can, because it's incredible the level of disorganization and inability the Trump administration has. And the more that these types of things have been leaked, the more that we've realized that our suspicions about the Trump administration are actually true, that they're not anything to be afraid of. They're really just insane and never really wanted to be in power in the first place. So now that these like cracks have appeared in Trump's power in the voters that supported him, we realized that we can start to manipulate that system within, and Congress knows that. So my hopes are, and what we really need to look at is in the next 5 to 10 days, what is actually going to be said in public, what's going to be said on the floors of Congress, which politicians are going to recognize the line in the sand as being the demarcation line for this war and start to wage the actual battle. Cory Booker right now is currently the only senator I've seen that, on a national level that is, that has said, here's something specific we must do now. If the Marijuana Justice Act gets passed on the floor of Congress, nothing Sessions said matters. The rescission of the memo is nothing because the memo is now nothing. The law will have been federal legality. And so there's a possibility, scant possibility, something like that can happen. But maybe the more likely scenario is that we get some sort of interim legislation, some sort of tactic that can block the Justice Department from being able to take this to the states. And if it comes to the states, again, as much as the senators and the Congress people and the governors are going to claim to fight it, because of course they want to have the will of the voters behind them, what can they actually do to stop the federal government from freezing assets or from recalling banks? There's not really a whole lot. So what we ultimately need are our national senators and Congress people to do something about this. Where that leaves us as voters and as industry participants is that we have a lot of work to do. We need to start calling our senators and congressmen immediately on a national level. You can call your locals and that's fine, but right now, like I said, we need action on the floors of Congress and in the Senate, and the only way to get that to happen is to show that there's support for this. If the national congressmen and senators can see that the will of the voters is behind them on this issue and they want to see them battle Trump and Sessions on this point, they will go to battle Trump and Sessions on this point. If they still feel that that Trump's voting public is stronger of a willpower than the cannabis industry and the will of the voters to make cannabis legal, they won't do a damn thing. They'll continue to quake in their boots at the Trump administration, and they'll continue to, lick the boots of Sessions and let them just run amok with the government however they like. But once the people of America realize that the tax money is being spent in ungodly amounts to prosecute something they don't agree with, they're not going to stand for that for very long. However, you're talking about maybe 1 to 2 years. Midterm elections are only just now coming up, so really realistically, we have to be on the phone now. They need to know that their midterm elections are in jeopardy if they are not going to fight on the floors of Congress now. They need to know if that a bill is actually introduced for them to sign on, like the Marijuana Justice Act, that they must sign on it or they will risk losing their reelection. So that's the one thing we can really do as individuals within the industry or as voters, doesn't matter. Individually, we all need to do that. If you need to find the information on where you find them or who to call, you can really just do a quick Google search for who are my representatives in Congress based on my district. It could be Senator Cory Gardner if you're in Colorado, but and he's also come out and said that that he's going to fight this in general terms. So this is a really good way to send a message to people like him whom have already put a message out there but not necessarily backed it up with any specific strategy or tactic, and tell them what you want them to do. Call Cory Gardner if you're in Colorado, for instance, and tell him support the Marijuana Justice Act when it hits the floor of Congress. Co-sponsor with Booker, do whatever you need to do, but make sure that they know that your vote is hinging on this point. And that can make some action on the individual level. On the company level or the organization level, there's something you can do there as well. And while tomorrow I'm going to be speaking more about corporate social responsibility, right now it is every cannabis business's corporate social obligation, not just responsibility, to do what they can to put money behind the causes and the senators and the Congress people who will make this happen. The fact of the matter is that if you own a business right now, your business is at risk. We don't know which businesses, we don't know which ones are going to target. We don't know if they're going to target just a couple of the big ones like we all suspect, or if they're going to go after all of them. It could be that they target a few of the big ones just to send a message and then 6 months later come after the small ones. So right now you need to start acting like your entire business is at risk, because it is. And the only thing that's going to allow your business to succeed at the level that we all envision for our businesses in this industry is to achieve federal legality. And as a company right now, what you need to be thinking about, especially coming into 2018, is how are you going to use the revenue that you're receiving off of customers whom believe in the legality of this product, believe in access to this product. How are you going to make the profits off of an industry that was started off of entrepreneurs who are currently spending jail sentences because the government continues to make this federally illegal? How are you going to justify those profits if you're not helping wage this fight with the voters? You need to learn how to meaningfully appropriate parts of your budget for the year to contributing to organizations that are going to achieve federal legality, that are going to be fighting for social justice, that are going to be fighting to exonerate every single prisoner currently in jail serving sentences for having sold cannabis in the past or possessed cannabis in the past. And at the same time, we need to fight to make sure that those people not only get exonerated, but also have access to licenses so that they can legally do cannabis business. But we have to protect that environment. If we don't, we're not just dooming the future potential entrepreneurs in this space, we're dooming ourselves. So, you know, tomorrow I'm going to be speaking at length about corporate social responsibility and how it can be meaningfully done in the cannabis space. What you need to be thinking about as a business owner is, what are the organizations that you know are going to fight for our interests federally? Who is going to be pushing the hardest in Congress, whether it's NCIA or the MIG, or even just, or different nonprofit organizations that are going to be lobbying or promoting the message on a voter level. Whatever those organizations are, you need to figure out which ones are going to align with your brand the most and how you can start to meaningfully engage with those organizations. I'm not talking about just, we're going to give 10% of our profits to this organization and let them do the fight. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about meaningful initiation and engagement within this movement. And when it comes to true corporate social responsibility, it's not throwing money at a problem. It's getting engaged on that problem from an employee level all the way up to the ownership and management. So I can teach you a little bit more tomorrow on what the actual strategies look like for that to be meaningful. But in light of sessions today, get thinking about this. Start looking at the organizations that you know are going to be supporting federal legality and that are going to be protecting the cannabis industry at large federally, not just the state organizations. We need to know who federally is going to prevent Jeff Sessions from doing anything. Who's going to prevent him from freezing assets? Who's going to prevent him from RICOing banks? Because that's how he's going to wreak some real havoc on us. Whether or not he wins the ultimate war, he'll win this battle if we don't step up and start fighting immediately with our voices, with our money, with our business strategies. And I know that we can stop him because the will of the voters is behind us. We just have to make sure that the people who can actually make change and actually physically stop him with legislation are out there doing it and are worried that they're going to lose the midterm elections if they don't. So in the next 5 to 10 days, we'll see ultimately what we need to do and what we need to worry about in the cannabis space. If we don't see a number of congressmen and senators step up like Cory Booker and specifically mention legislation that they're going to do to protect us, then we have a lot to worry about. I'm hoping that what we're going to see is a real stance by Congress and by the Senate to not allow this to happen, from the House and the Senate, that is, to not allow this to happen. That's what I'm hoping for. Maybe we'll see that, but in the meantime, we can't just hope. We need to actually get engaged. So if you want to know more about how you can meaningfully do that as a company, reach out to me. I want to do everything I can to ensure that this little Keebler elf motherfucker can't touch our industry one bit. He does not have the power on his side. We do. So let's talk about how we meaningfully can access that power and use it to fight for justice. Anyway, reach out to me. Let me know. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.